short video, I would like to look at the international patent system. The international patent system, more specifically in the light of territoriality and the right of priority. It's fair to say that in modern times, we expect something different than what is really on offer. In modern times, if you look, for example, at the TRIPS agreement, we think about an international patent system as a system where you have substantive norms that have been harmonized. Think also, for example, of the EPC. We have norms about patentability, what constitutes patent infringement, and so forth. Now, the Paris Convention is rather different in that respect. There is very little there in terms of substantive harmonization. That's the kind of thing that they probably couldn't agree on in those days, or that they felt was not necessary, not a step they wanted to take. After all, these union treaties, as the Paris Union is one, were rather frequent and rather common in those days. Now, what is it then that we have, and where does this territoriality and where does this right of priority fit in? Well, if you look at the Paris Convention, what you really have is the constitution of what I would call a club. You join a club, and the aim of the club is, when you're a member of the club, we break down access barriers for foreign inventors, in our case in patent law. Now, that was quite an important step in an era that was, after all, utterly dominated by nationality as an entry requirement. It was rather common to have rules to say, you need the nationality to have access to this or that legal instrument, and therefore also to the benefit of a patent, a trademark, and so forth. So the idea is to create an international system by tearing down barriers. Very little else. We'll see later on where that leads us. Now, how does that happen? Because one of the rather weird ideas about this, we always mention territoriality. The patent system is a territorial system, a system based on territoriality. Well, that word, that concept of territoriality, does not appear in the Paris Convention. It is not part of the legal system. What is part of the legal system is Article 2 of the Paris Convention. Article 2 talks about national treatment for nationals of countries of the Union. Nationals. You see the idea of nationality come back. So nationals, says paragraph 1, nationals of any country of the Union shall, as regards the protection of industrial property, enjoy in all the other countries of the Union the advantages that their respective laws now grant or may hereafter grant to nationals. That is, all without prejudice to the rights specially provided for by this convention. Let's pause here for a second. I mean, the last bit is fairly obvious. The little bit of harmonization, the little bit of harmonized substantive norms that are established by the convention will, of course, benefit everyone. I mean, that's the kind of little bonus that everyone gets. But the main bit that you get is that you get, in all the other countries of the Union, the advantages that their respective laws now grant or may hereafter grant to nationals. That's the concept of national treatment. If you have the nationality, in all other countries, you are treated as if you were a national of that country. As it were, we forget about the international element. We treat you as a national inventor, and therefore you get the benefit of the right that is normally reserved to nationals. That's indeed what follows. If you keep reading on in Article 2, the message then is that consequently, they shall have the same protection as the latter, and the same legal remedy against any infringement of their right, provided that the conditions and formalities imposed upon nationalities are complied with. In other words, you have to register. You have to comply with the formalities. That's a separate thing. You know, the procedure that you have to follow, the application that you have to make. Okay, application, how do you do that, what form, and so forth. That is being determined by these national laws in each and every country where you apply. That's logical. If you have a registration system, you have to register, you register under national laws. But what you get is the same protection and the same legal remedies. Now that's important for later purposes, because what you see here is that the right and the remedy are coupled. They come as the same thing. Now that's not surprising, because if you look at patent law, the reality of the matter is that you don't necessarily get a positive right. There is not a single patent law in the world, to the best of my knowledge, that says that if you get a patent for a new product, for a new inventive product, you have the positive right to make that product and to put it on the market. If your product is, for example, so polluting, or your way of manufacturing is so polluting that it offends against environmental law, a patent will not solve that problem. You will not have the positive right to make it. What you will have is the negative right to stop anyone else from making it for the best part of 20 years at least from the priority date. So in that kind of scenario where you have a negative right, the remedy is important. The remedy is anything you get. You have to be able to stop the others, and therefore the idea that the protection and the remedy, the means of redress, come under the same heading is quite natural. Now, if you look at these provisions, you could think that, well, this is rather nice in 1883 maybe, but in modern circumstances, you get to country by country approaches that are burdensome. If you want to exploit your invention, if you want to get your patent and then exploit your invention in about 150 countries, this system tells you that yes, you will get access, but you have to apply 150 times, and you get 150 different patent rights governed by different provisions. One could solve that. One could attempt to solve that by saying, well, really what you get here, this kind of same protection, well, that protection is determined. We need to find out what that protection is. Well, we give you the same choice of law rule. We give you, for example, the protection that everyone gets in their country of origin, or the country of first application, or whatever however you define that origin. Well, let's leave it there, because that doesn't work anymore. If you look at the TRIPS agreement, in Article 3 of the TRIPS agreement, national treatment is taken over. The TRIPS agreement doesn't change national treatment. It wants to build on the Paris Convention and the Berne Convention for copyright. And therefore, we keep national treatment. Now, in order to explain national treatment to those lawyers who are the trade related, the trade lawyers in this context, there's a footnote to Article 3 to explain what national treatment means and what that same protection means. Well, if you read that footnote, probably, I'm not saying that the draftsmen were aware of the consequences of this, but the reference there is to substantive rights. If it's all about substance, you can't give the same treatment by having the same choice of law rule for everyone, because the same choice of law rule, for example, country of origin, would point to different countries for different inventors. If then that same treatment, that same protection is about substance, they will get different substantive rights. You may have different elements in the patent system in the absence of harmonization, and therefore that doesn't work anymore. So national treatment, same level of protection, is about substantive provisions, substantive levels of protection and remedies in patent law. Now that's not the end of it, because if you think about it, go back to the first bit of Article 2. Nationals of any country, what do they get? The same as all the other nationals get. If you do it that way, in a sense, what you install here is also a gatekeeping provision. This international system, weird as it is for our current purposes, this idea that you just provide access, and therefore, if everyone has access everywhere, if they apply everywhere, they get international protection. Or if they only want international protection in 10 countries, they can apply in 10 countries. You give them access, and therefore you give them access to not only a national patent, but to international protection. You create an international patent protection system. Well, if that's the case, if that is what is happening, there is also a provision there that says you need to be a national of one of the member states. There is also an encouragement there. There's a gatekeeping provision saying you will only get it if your country has signed up to the club. And therefore, if your country has not signed up to the club, you don't get it. So there is this gatekeeping idea, this idea that not everyone will get international protection. Some of them will get it if you are a national of the club, of one of the member states of the club. And then, if that's the case, what you get is this national treatment provision. Yeah, we do two things at the same time. We have a gatekeeping provision, but at the same time, that gatekeeping provision also determines that when you pass it, what is it that you get? Well, you get this national treatment, same protection, same remedies. It becomes a bit more flexible in Article 3. If you move on to Article 3, you get the idea that there is the same treatment for certain other categories. If you are a national of a non-member state, but you have a real and effective industrial and commercial establishment in the territory of one of the countries of the Union, if you effectively work in a member state of the club, if you are based there, your commercial establishment is there, well then, even if you have another passport that is that of a non-member state of the club, we will let you in. You know, there is this kind of relaxation, this kind of idea that you need to treat everyone operating in these economies the same. That is this real and effective commercial establishment. Nationality is the norm, but if you are a foreigner fully established there and operating there, we treat you in the same way. Now, in an international patent system, there is not a problem. You have to register. You have to go around the members of the club. Part of that registration is that it leads to publication of your patent. The information becomes public. That's part of the deal under which you get your exclusive right. You have to reveal the thing. There is publicity there. Not for anyone else to copy for 20 years, but at least to put it in the public knowledge, in the public domain. People can use the technology to do something else with it, to invent around it, to invent on top of it. You know, that's the aim of the game. That's the arguable purpose, what you also find in the US Constitution, by the way. If that's the case, then there's another hurdle. There is a problem, because as soon as you go from country A to country B, and if publication happens at some stage, the knowledge is revealed, someone can take it, copy it, and run off to country C and register there. There is maybe a problem with novelty, but maybe not. You know, there is no harmonization. National rules can decide what novelty you want. If you want national novelty or international or global novelty, that's a decision for each and every country. There is no rule in the system. So how do we solve that? Well, Article 4 provides the solution. It says that any person who has duly filed an application for a patent or for the registration of utility, model, or industrial design or trademark, doesn't matter for our purposes here. If you have duly filed an application in one of the countries of the Union, then you shall enjoy, for the purpose of filing in the other countries, a right of priority during the periods hereinafter fixed. 12 months it is for patents. So what we provide is a right of priority, saying if you have applied, you have 12 months to file all your other applications. If you do that within the 12 months, we will give you priority. Anyone else who had come earlier with the same invention will lose. You will get the patent. You will be able to claim priority on the basis of the date of your first application. Now that's important, because if you want an international system, the idea was that technology would be exploited at an international level. The idea was not that we would all do things isolated in our countries. The idea was that you have a cross-border environment, a cross-border economy that is in operation. It is therefore also important that you give the right in the same invention to the same person. he or she may not necessarily be the inventor, because the one thing I left out when I read that provision is there's also a rule saying it applies this right of priority, it applies to the successor in title. That may be a commercial arrangement, but we want things to be in the same hands, and therefore this right of priority. In order to get access to the international patent system, this is your second gatekeeping rule. You don't automatically get it. You have to prove that you are the one who started the thing. You are entitled to this right of priority. Now, importantly, there is this provision that any filing that is equivalent to a regular national filing under domestic law of any country of the Union or under a bilateral or multilateral treaty concluded between countries of the Union shall be recognized to give right to this right of priority. In other words, what do we mean by filing? Well, it's again up to each and every country in the absence of harmonization to decide what amounts to a filing. And on that basis, you get the right of priority. And then any person who has filed gets it. Now that's the idea, the double gatekeeping rule, and you get in. The problem that we have in our modern times is that it's simple. In all the days, this is simple. You have a single inventor for a single invention. And therefore, it's quite logical that if you try to apply this rule, any person who filed, what you see, for example, is the European Patent Office still sticking to the rule saying you need, for right of priority, you need to have the same inventor and the same invention. If you have more than one inventor, then they both have to come together. Okay, there's a rule saying successor in title can change that system. You can replace A and B by A and the successor of B, but that's a separate route. That's a separate thing. The rule stays the same, that if you have in the first application two parties, A and B, then A cannot come alone in Europe, and B cannot come alone to claim the right of priority. We won't grant you the right of priority. On the other hand, if you come for the invention, as long as your invention is smaller, as long as you only claim priority for a reduced scope, for a reduced bit of the invention, you pass. That works. Now, arguably, there is something wrong with our idea that we require the same persons, two of them to come. Because arguably, what the treaty obliges us to do is to give national treatment to any person who has filed. A has filed, B has filed. They both separately, rather than jointly, have a right of priority. Now that is all the more logical if you look at, it's up to the rule that says it's for national law to decide what amounts to a filing. If you have, for example, in the US, a provisional patent application, you can put loads of people together with loads of potential research and inventions. Goes in as one application. They then have 12 months to file the definitive application. That definitive application doesn't have to mention all of them, doesn't have to mention all the inventions. You can split it out. Who's the real inventor of this bit? Who's the real inventor of that bit? Now, if these people then go and apply in Europe under Article 4.2, they have regularly filed, all of them in the US. It's up to the US to have this provisional system. We may not like it, but we have to respect it. We do, by the way. The European Patent Office plays the game correctly there. They accept that. Well, if that's the case, then it makes no sense to say that any person who was with A and B, say A, B, and C are together in the provisional US application. If later on they realize that there are three separate inventions, A with invention A, B with invention B, C with invention C, it makes no sense for us in Europe to say A can only apply for his or her own invention A, if B and C join. They may have left the team. You hold a hostage to B and C signing up. If they don't, and if you refuse the national treatment. The argument is, that's an argument, the European Patent Office doesn't accept it at present. My argument is that in that case, you are in breach of your treaty obligations. You deny national treatment to inventor A, in my example. Now, part of the EPC's argument is, well, there's a rule in successors in titles, but that's a separate track. All that rule says is that if you have more than one, all of them can sell the patent application, or sell the invention rather, and anything that flows from it, to a third party. Party X can buy whatever A, B, and C had. Party X can also buy what B and C had and be in tandem now with with A. Yeah. That's a separate track. It doesn't tell you anything about any person who filed. But anyway, that's something just to think about. Just what do we mean by territoriality and this right of priority? How does it operate and how should it operate? What is important to note is that there is this first step. This is procedure. And this is what we all do under our national laws in respect of the treaty. Therefore, the EPO is perfectly entitled to have its own rules insofar as they don't violate the Paris Convention, insofar as they don't violate the right to national treatment. Once you're past that hurdle, it is important to remember that what you, of course, get is then determined by the way national treatment is interpreted in Article 2. Then you get the same substantive rights, the same remedies in each country. You get, in terms of applicable patent law, for substantive issues, you get the national law of each country. Nice as it may be, complicated as it is, if you have that in multiple countries with different levels of protection. In a harmonized system such as under the EPO and the EPC's provisions, that's easy because we roughly have the same, well, we should have the same, but we roughly have the same patent system. If you do that on a transatlantic basis, if you do that on a global basis, it becomes more complicated because you might get very different rights, very different remedies, very different exceptions on a country-by-country basis. It doesn't make things easier if you want to have litigation in one court for infringement in multiple jurisdictions. But that's the kind of system that we're stuck with. I hope at least that this video gives you a bit of an insight in what kind of international patent system we have and the kind of surprises, the kind of deeper bits that are in the principles of territoriality and the right to priority. Thank you for your attention.